for everyone who's joining, as you all know, the H1b registration period has ended and the results are expected very soon. As much as I want everyone here to get the lottery, of course, there will be mixed results. Some are going to get it, some are not going to get it. So what we are trying to do here is get you resources so that you are aware of the alternate options. Syndesus is one of the platforms or one of the ways that you could explore. And today we will spend some time learning what that looks like. But before we get into what that is, welcome, Marc. And I think I shared the sentiment of why this was set up. But, every year H1B lottery results leave many disappointed.
Yes.
Can you talk to us what are the key challenges that people face?
It's 30 plus years of a system with only 85,000 positions and hundreds of thousands applying. I personally view it as an extremely unfair system. And what it leaves is many talented people who should be staying in the US run after 3 years, their OPT is expiring. The system disappoints many, many people every single year, and it's been doing it for a long time.
Got it. And I think today we want to spend some time briefly discussing what the options are if they were not selected in lottery. So can you talk to us about what that would look like?
There are many possibilities of what people can do. The option of moving to Canada is one of many that people should explore. We jokingly call it Plan C for Canada, but everyone should build out an entire matrix, I think, of the options for them. Canada is only one of them. We've moved 100 plus. We're very experienced at this. We've been doing this since 2017. It is an option. It is not the option for everyone.
Absolutely. And if you've been here a while, you all have seen me share a bunch of content on what your options are, be it moving to O1, be it moving to Day 1 CPT, if H4 EAD is an option, and I can resurface that. But today, with Marc here, let's focus on the option to Canada. So why do you think it's a viable option for someone who wasn't selected on H1B?
So if I think of the people that we've met over the years who've come to the US, the perfect scenario is to qualify for Canada. Let's get the qualification out of the way. You have to, the program we're talking about is Global Talent Stream. It's Canada's version of a work visa. It is for people who have a tech background. It was set up specifically to bring tech talent into Canada permanently. So in this scenario, because Syndesus is a Canadian corporation, we're allowed to use this program. We've been using it since 2017 when it came out. So the perfect scenario for us where we can help someone is someone who is employed in the US, has a tech job in the US. That job can be done remotely. The person wants to stay and keep that job. That sounds kind of crazy, but that's part of the requirement. It's that your company wants to keep you, which always is the case, and you want to keep this job. And even better, if you look at the US and say, I came to the US because I had an American dream. I wanted to be here. And then some people, they lose the lottery. They say, I'm going home. It's no problem. This scenario works when you say, I didn't want to leave. I would like to stay in North America. Then we're offering the option of, okay, Canada can work with this visa program. There is a way to make this work because in our scenario, you're keeping the job you have right now. You are keeping your US job. That's what we help you do.
Okay, so let's repeat that for anyone who's just joining today. One of the options, if your H1B lottery wasn't selected, is you moving to Canada. For the way Syndesus helps is you get to keep your current job and you work with the employer to kind of move you to Canada while continue to be in the same role. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. So often people come to us, they'll be following you on Instagram, they'll hear about this option, then they have a conversation with the Syndesus team. We work with your employer. So you always come to us for information first, then we get your employer on the call. We've done hundreds and hundreds of these calls. The sad part is, Priya, the employer in the US, I worked in Silicon Valley for 20 years. I worked for 7 VC-backed startups. Most of my career has been in tech and sales in Silicon Valley. So a lot of our clients are tech companies, and we'll talk to an HR manager or an engineering manager. 99% of the time, we have that manager saying, I never knew this possibility existed. When OPT expires, the worker goes back to home country and we terminate them. Everybody loses. So me or my sales team will be on a call with a US, HR exec or an engineering manager, And they're like, how could this possibly work? And we say it's simple. Syndesus is a Canadian corporation. We have permission from the Canadian government to sponsor work visas. To sponsor work visa, you have to qualify, which means you're in a tech job, you're making over 90,000 US. There's a couple other simple qualifications. The job can be done remotely. This isn't where you fly back and forth from Canada to the US. It has to be a pure remote job, which means some of you who have a hardware job, or if you work in a lab, that won't work. You're remote. And in that case, we say, okay, if you qualify for this work visa, Syndesus sponsors it, takes 2, 3, 4 months, work visa approved. Worker then physically moves from the US to Canada, one-way trip. The idea is you're not coming back. When you get into Canada, Syndesus then employs you remotely. Same job, same laptop, same US boss, same time zone. Nothing changes. Your background changes. Now you're in Vancouver. Now you're in Toronto. So we're basically using it where it's a unique scenario where we're basically, you could say we're moving your job to Canada, but now we're putting you on a path and we're putting you into the Canadian immigration system. We start with the work visa. We know then you want to get to permanent residence, and then you want to get to citizenship. We want to give you immigration stability.
Got it. I think that is super helpful. So I think you kind of answered my next question, which would be how would Syndesus assist with this transition while maintaining job continuity? So just so that everyone here understands, you will work with the employer. There are certain criteria that we have to meet, which like number one, I think is it needs to be a fully remote job. Number two is you need to be making $90,000. Number three, your employer needs to agree. And then you move to Canada and continue to keep that job, and you move to the Canadian immigration system. Is this an accurate understanding that if I need to move back from Canada to the US, I kind of go through like another H1b lottery or L1, and like it's the same thing like when you're out of the country, you kind of like are starting from scratch. You just have like more options now because you're in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a few. Priya, it's a really good question because I've seen a few things happen. There's one group of people we move up. They may be. I've seen them be in Canada 2, 3, 4 years. Then all of a sudden, I see they're back in Silicon Valley or New York, and I'm like, oh, how did that work? They moved because they left because they had to, but maybe they found another company, something else worked. They came back. That's rare. What most people do is they want to get to Canadian citizenship. So they get permanent residence, which got a little bit harder. We could talk about that. Then they get citizenship. If you get Canadian citizenship, which can take 5 to 6 years, then you get what's called, you as a Canadian citizen can come to the US and work on a TN visa. It's different. Every year, tens of thousands of Canadians move to the US. There's over 100,000 Canadians in Silicon Valley in tech because they use the TN visa to come down. It's a work visa. So some Canadians work in the US 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're holding Canadian passport. They'll go home eventually. They have a nice long career in the US. So we call that the boomerang strategy. You go to Canada, you get your passport, then come work in the US as much as you want. You'll still eventually go back to Canada, but you can have an amazing career.
Yeah, so like the long-term strategy is you get your Canadian citizenship and then eventually figure out a path. But if you want a short-term strategy, then you find another employer and it's the same route that you would be choosing, which is going through an H1b lottery, L1 or whatever else.
You got it. The one thing we can't help with is L1 because we are not moving. The companies do L1s. They have branches on both sides of the border. Our goal is to help people stay in Canada long term. And I say that, Priya, from experience. I'm an American citizen. I spent 20 years in Silicon Valley. I went to Canada on student visas to get my master's, my MBA, came right back to Silicon Valley. Then I went back to Canada, worked for 2 different jobs on work permits and venture capital, another startup. Then I came back. So I'm an American citizen with 5 years experience of living in Canada, student visas and work visas.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, and when I was talking L1, I was not meeting the same employer. It's like you are with Syndesus, you find a different job in Canada, and then you kind of have that employer eventually sponsor you for a US branch or something. Yeah. So
yeah, if you want to come back. Yeah. And what I see some people do is we stay in touch with the people we've helped move. We help them move. Then 2 years later, 1 year later, they say, oh, I'm working for another American company remotely. I'm like, wonderful. That's great. They stay in Canada, but they realize they work remotely for US companies. They get better pay. The Canadian companies don't pay as much. So some people who've been in the US say, wait a minute, I want that US paycheck. And I'm like, but you want Canadian immigration. You get the best of
Yeah.
both worlds. Work remotely.
That's super interesting. And I think when we were talking, this seemed like a very interesting option. So we thought it is best to bring this to our community. And I think some of the points that you're touching on, we did get specific questions from our followers. I think a few we have answered, but let's just go through them one after the other. The first question that we got was, what are the prerequisites? Will you reach out to the company or will you train us to speak to them?
Both. The best avenue is we speak to the company, because then what we're going to walk through is we're going to talk. There's a question that's always asked to the company at some point. It's a tough question, but it's a reality check question of what will you do if this person doesn't OPT expires. And unfortunately, what we hear almost every single time is, we're sorry, the worker will return home to India, Pakistan, and they will lose their job. We cannot keep employing them remotely. So we're talking to the US company like, you're going to lose this amazing person. And they say, yes, we are. And then our conversation becomes, we're going to help you retain them. The whole goal here is we're going to help you retain that person. And you see a reaction from the company of like, tell us more. How does this work? Walk us through that. But it's always a happy moment because you see the U.S. company saying, well, we thought I have to go out and find a replacement. And then you ask the company, well, what does it cost for you to replace the worker? 50 to 100,000. They have to recruit someone new. All that good work that this person did for 2 or 3 years, they take with it and they leave. The company starts all over. They want to keep the worker. And it's always like, that's why we always tell them, put us with your manager. We'll walk through how it works. We'll tell them US Canadian immigration. Sometimes people are a bit shy and they say, I don't want to put you with my manager yet. Then to your second point, we'll have the call with them. We'll share how this works. And then we'll share like an email template or how to reach out to their manager saying, here's how it works. And some people say, I'm more comfortable if I'm in control. I want to approach my manager. We understand. We'll help either way.
I think one question that just eyeballed was, where do we pay taxes? So I think if you could clarify that, given it's tax season, I'll move to the next one.
Absolutely. So I did this myself. So when I moved to Canada, one thing to emphasize here is, you take the Canada option, you're leaving the US behind. There is no, you don't, the US is done. The US has basically said your OPT expired or something went wrong. You're not in the US anymore. You're permanently leaving. So in that case, Syndesus employs you in Canada. We employ you as an employee, which means you get your paycheck into your Canadian bank account with all the taxes taken out. We give you Canadian 401k if your company doesn't match. We give you, we will take care of all the taxes and everything. You're now a Canadian taxpayer. The US doesn't matter anymore. It's out of the picture. 100% Canadian.
Yeah, I think the big thing for everyone here to understand is you are leaving the US, but I think what Syndesus is doing is making sure that you're probably able to keep the same job if it's a remote position, and that makes sense for the employer. So I think that's super helpful. From a tax perspective, that would be Canada then, because you are leaving the US. The next question that we got was, do you work with all industries or just tech?
It's mostly tech, because to qualify for the Canadian work visa under Global Talent Stream, the goal of the program was built to bring a couple 100,000 tech workers into Canada because they realized they had a massive shortage. That's why they put this work visa out there. But it's for the tech worker, hardware or software. There's also a carve out for the manager. So if you're a CTO, VP engineering, if you're leading a team, you qualify. What doesn't qualify, unfortunately, so I have an MBA. So business people, it does not work. If you're an accountant, it doesn't work. If you're a consultant, it doesn't work. But there's also carve-outs for unique talent. So sometimes someone will come to us and say, oh, I'm a business analyst, and I've learned not to get in. I always defer to our Canadian immigration lawyers. They're the professionals. On calls with me, they'll say, Marc, that business analyst, you thought they might not have qualified. They have a computer science, they have a bachelor's degree. The work is technical. It will qualify. So in that case, I always defer to the Canadian immigration lawyer. I let them make that decision.
Okay, so I could probably be working in the healthcare industry, but as long as my job is tech, and it's fully remote, I could probably, healthcare is a bad example, maybe like a different industry, because I don't think of many healthcare jobs that are remote. But if
You're
there
right.
is a different industry, but my job is tech and it's fully remote, then that person will qualify.
Yes, most likely. Like you said, healthcare is there's data scientists who work in healthcare, but if you were in a lab, I always say no to a lab. But we did have someone who was dealing with hardware, and the company said we're going to ship some of the hardware to Toronto to the person's to their apartment. They can do some of the work from there, and I'm like, well, that works. That's fine, no problem. So actually, as someone who was in the hardware space was able to work remotely from Canada.
Okay. So I think the important part for everyone here to understand is that as long as your job is like tech, I think it's important to initiate this conversation. If it works out and it qualifies, great. If it doesn't, it's fine. Can you also touch on the 90,000 that you mentioned? Is there a minimum pay that someone should be making for them to qualify?
Yeah, and that is a 90,000 Canadian dollars, so it's probably in the 70,000 plus range.
Yes.
Almost every tech worker we work with is over US 100,000, so it's never really an issue. That's the Canada want to make sure that the workers have a significant wage, a livable wage. It's usually never an issue with people who work in the US.
Got it. The next question that we have is what are the work visa permit options for dependent spouses?
So this is a good one. This is a benefit of Canada's system. I'm sure a lot of people who follow you they're very familiar with H4 and the problems in the US where somehow the US thinks it's okay to you have a couple and only one of them works. Canada's conclusion is that's ridiculous. Of course the other person should work. So what happens is the global talent stream, the work visa that Syndesus works with mostly for tech workers, if you get that, it comes with an open work permit for the spouse or for the partner. They can work anywhere in Canada.
So they can start working immediately once they move, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I have another interesting question. Why will my employer interact with Syndesus? I think it will go into the coaching mode, but can you talk to us about why would that happen? Are there examples that they could reference?
Yeah, I know where that question comes from because the dozens and dozens of phone calls I've been on, I see a hesitation where someone's saying, my company's been so generous to me. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to come at them with like with this extra work because there's a conversation that happens where they said, Mark, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm like, my company's not moving me to Canada. They're not moving me to Hong Kong. They're not moving me to France. They're not going to move me to Canada. And what we always say is, don't worry about moving you to Canada. The conversation with your employer is when we're talking with them, it's like, oh, this person's part of what team? What are they working on? And you hear some employer with a lot of pride saying, oh, this person's on our data science team. This person's helping us build. We're a startup and they're critical to the team. We always hear that. And what we know from that conversation is that US company, they have spent tens of thousands of dollars on US immigration. When I've asked HR directors, I'm like, what's the budget for anyone in H1b lottery? What I always hear is minimum 10,000, 15,000. If a green card's involved, 20, 25,000. They've put that money aside because they believe in the worker that much and they want to help them. So when we have a conversation, we're like, we're going to help you keep this worker. And the company says, we can keep them. I said, yeah, they're going to be across the border. But they were, in a lot of cases, we say, well, were you remote? They're like, yeah, we're remote. And we say, we're going to help you retain this person. I think I've seen so many times the question comes from someone saying, this sounds complicated. They don't realize is when you leave and they terminate you and they go through 3 or 4 or 5 months to find the perfect person to replace you, that's a disaster for the company. They don't want to lose you.
Yep.
And our team is basically saying, we're going to make this easy. So the worker after an hour on the call says, I know what to do and when to do. And the company will say, are you taking care of our person? We say, yes, we are. That's what we do.
This is more applicable to employers of a smaller scale, startups, medium size versus global companies.
That is exactly right. And that's a very good insight. So sometimes someone will come to us and we'll see like Ford or we'll see like Google. Ford, Google, all the big tech companies, all the big US companies already have Canadian subsidiaries. If you worked for one of those big companies, you would go to your HR and say, can you move me to the Canadian branch? Most of our clients are small companies, SMB, VC-backed startups, seed, Series A, B, C, D, and E. They don't have a Canadian presence. And then they come to us and say, we don't have a Canadian presence. We say, don't worry about it. Syndesus is a Canadian corporation. It's an employer of record. It's been in Canada for 10 years. it, like right now we employ 130 plus Canadians. We've been doing this for a while. Will handle the employment. That's a really good insight. It does have to be a smaller company.
Yes, it has to be a small company. Again, I think that was the question that was coming to my mind as well. If you are someone who's working at a global company, your first stop has to be your own company and figuring out how to transition there. This is for someone who's at a smaller company, a startup, etc., where they've already invested a lot in you. And I think you're handling a really important part where losing you is just going to do more damage to the company versus hiring someone. So I think that's great.
Yes.
I think I saw one great question. When should one start the process? How much of buffer time should one look at before maxing out?
Canadian immigration has gotten more challenging over the last 9 months. There was a time when if we were having this conversation a year ago, I would say 2 to 4 months, start to finish, until your work permit's given. I would say now 3-4 months at a minimum. So the ideal scenario is if your OPT is expiring, you work backwards from that. And it's better not to wait. So if someone's saying, maybe someone is listening thinking, well, my OPT expires December 20th, I can wait till July. The answer would be don't. What you can do is you can get everything moving, because your employer, the idea of waiting till the last minute, it worries them. It scares them when that it's getting closer and closer, and then you're racing for a solution. If you say, look, this could take safely 4 to 6 months, take that time to do it right. And you definitely don't want to. We've had people come to us saying my OPT is expiring. They've had to leave the US and then go directly either from India or Pakistan to Canada. That's not ideal. What you want to have is you're still on OPT, it hasn't expired yet, and then you move to Canada. It's a better scenario.
What if we want to switch out job stream, maybe from tech to management later? Will this option still support it?
So what we encourage people to do is during the your work permit, you don't want to switch jobs. That's something I find very odd about the Canadian system. Like sometimes we'll hear an American client will call us up and say, "I want to give this person a $20,000-$30,000 bonus." We're like, "That's wonderful. Make sure to ask the immigration lawyer to write into the Canadian Immigration Service and ask that you can give this person more money, or ask about a job title change." What's easier to do is stay as you are, get permanent residence. In Canada is a different system than the US. In the US, you're looking to your employer saying, can you help with the green card? Canada basically says the employer has nothing to do or very little to do with your path to how you want to stay. So in this case, I would always encourage people, get your permanent residence as whatever you need to do. And in
In
this case,
between.
with the changes in Canada, Syndesus is an Ontario corporation. What we've been telling people is, don't go to Vancouver, Montreal, go to Toronto, where Syndesus can help you with the provincial nominee program to get you on your way to permanent residence. We have the ability to help there. Just stay with the one job till you have your PR, then do what you want. You're in control.
Okay, so if I understand this right, if I am choosing this option and moving to Canada, I will be ideally moving to Toronto, and I should try to stay in the same job till I have my PR before moving anything. Again, I think I need to ask this question because I think this is top of mind for anyone who's thinking about Canada. All is not that great with Canada at this moment. How do you propose that people prepare for this shift in Canada's immigration stance? I know we touched upon it a little bit, but I think this will be a massive move for anyone who's like been in the US, studied in the US, invested in the US, and then trying to move to Canada, where we don't hear like the most of the rosy things.
Yeah, it was last summer, and that thing started to change, where the Canadian political situation, the pendulum swung against student visas, work visas. It got more difficult because of Canadian politics. The election, I believe, is coming up in Canada on April 28th. What happens is that election will happen. Then whichever party wins, they will come out with their own revised immigration policy. It could be 3, 4, 5 months later, but then there'll be a change in Canadian immigration policy. I personally believe, like, I know things have gotten tougher. We've seen it, we've witnessed it, but it hasn't gotten impossible, just harder. We still move tech people in. We still, when we meet with people, people are still saying, I am happy, I've got PR, or some of them are like, I got my citizenship already. So it becomes a surer bet. And when some people are weighing them, what we always say is, if your OPT was expiring, the US already gave up on you. It doesn't matter what you think about the US. The US, because of their, my personal opinion, bad immigration policy, took away your chance to be here. If you choose Canada, it's similar to the US. You can see how you like it. You can be there for a couple years. You might come to a conclusion, hey, this works for me. Or maybe you have an option to come back to the US. You might say it wasn't the right thing for me. But if you're there over the years, new administration takes over in Canada, things will change.
You've been working with people to do this for a long time. What are the biggest concerns that you have noticed that people and their employers have, and how does Syndesus help them address?
The employers, they're in shock when you tell them, oh, here's this work visa program, no lottery, it's based on merit. And you see a reaction from the US person saying, is this true? Is it some new thing? Is it going to go away? We're like, no, it's been in place since 2017. It's how Canada does immigration. So I think for the employer, it's trying to get their head around saying, we have to tell them, look, US immigration, H1b is a US thing. It's not around the world. It's just US. It's not a good system. When you leave, other countries have better immigration systems. So that's, I think, the biggest hurdle of they understand that. And then when they understand that, then when they look at Syndesus, they say, well, what do you do? And we're like, we're a Canadian corporation. We have the right to sponsor work visas. We've helped over 100 people move to Canada, and we legally employ Canadians who work in Canada remotely for US. Then usually the employer nods and says, okay, I'm clear. For the worker, it's where the questions are going for you. It's like, am I going to be happy here? What if I don't have this cool job and I have to get a low paying Canadian job? That's a legitimate concern.
Canadian job market, which I have not heard the best things about. So I think people have their fears, but because they are able to move with their job, especially if you're in a smaller company, you don't have the option to transfer over. I think this could be an option that is explored. I think, like I said, I think when we came across, we thought it was really interesting that an option like this existed, and we wanted to bring this to our community. So thank you so much for sharing. But what if you lose your job? Okay, that's a good one. What happens if you lose your job or if there is a layoff?
And that's happened. It's happened. It happens every year. Someone will reach out to us saying, my VC-backed company ran out of money. They laid us off. We're working right now with someone that happened to. We moved to Vancouver 2 years ago. So what happens is Canada won't throw you out of the country. And in the US, you have 60 days. You're in a panic. Canada basically says you have a 2 or 3 year work visa. It's valid the entire time. You need to find another company that will say, I will sponsor that work visa. So what Syndesus does is we then go, when we've done this multiple times, someone gets laid off, they come to us, we then go to all our other companies and say, here's a data scientist. We try and find a job, and we've been successful at that. Or we tell the worker, look for another US job, and if you can find a US job, we're still your remote employer. Your work permit says Syndesus on it. So what I know the situation is that they find another US job, and then we go up to Canadian immigration, oh, this person's job title changed. So it's not a good situation, but you're not going to get kicked out of Canada at the moment. You won't have 90 days to leave the country, or 60.
Got it. Okay. So I think I understand the US option, where I think if I find another job, of course, like we'll follow the same process with the US employer and continue the job. My question is, when you mentioned that Syndesus is going to help you find something, will Syndesus help the person find something with Canadian employers as well, or is it just with the US employers, or how does that work?
We'll try with our US employers because we have 80 or 85 clients. We employ, separate from this service, we employ Canadians who work remotely for US companies. So we do this service, but Syndesus as a company is an employer of record. So we have 80 plus companies that work with. We would try and help them.
Okay, so you are basically using your network of US based employers to kind of get them, but not the Canadian jobs. So they still can like continue applying for the Canadian jobs, and if they find something, that's great, because then the Canadian employer can sponsor them. But because you are Syndesus as an employer has a network of US employers, that's where you're going to start. Is that correct?
Yes, and one thing we also do, USCIS does this in the US. If you look up and say which companies use the H1B lottery, it's all public information. The same in Canada. The companies that use Global Talent Stream that signed up are all publicly listed. We'll tell a person, you go there because those companies said they would sponsor work visas, and they have already. If you contact them, they'll know what GTS is. So we try. That's the way we can help, because it's like, because some people ask, well, how would I know who sponsors a work visa? We're like, here's the Canadian government list of everyone who uses Global Talent Stream.
And then I think the most important question before we let you go is how can people learn more about Syndesus and connect with the team?
Syndesus.com, the website. There is plenty of places there to reach out to the team. The moment you reach out to someone, call is scheduled. We as you'd asked earlier, Priya, you're like, Marc, is there someone going to talk to the worker or their employer? The best scenario is both. We love the call where the worker's there and the employer's there because you both are asking different questions, but we totally understand if you say, look, I want to research this first. I want to make sure this is a good thing for me and my family, then have the call with us first and we'll prep you on how to talk to your manager.
Got it. No, this is all super helpful. I hope everyone got their questions answered. And thank you so much, Marc. I think, and sharing everything with so much transparency. I think if we have questions, we'll definitely get in touch. Everyone, please leave in comments. Like if you are having specific questions, I think that just gives us a better understanding if we need to do a round 2 or if we need to get anything else answered. So please do that. But thanks again. And all the details will be available in stories as well as on our page. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.